This conference will now be recorded.
I hope you guys are able to see the screen now. Okay, so in the yesterday's demo session, we have discussed about what is performance testing. We understood what is performance testing all about. We have discussed about the LoadRunner architecture at high level. We have discussed about how to record a sample script using Vusion. We've also covered the course content. Okay, so if you have any further questions related to the course content, or in fact the course duration or course, anything related to course, so please reach out to me. So I will be helping you out, in understanding and your questions. So now, in today's session, we will be discussing about the different types of performance testing, right? And before discussing different types of performance testing, okay, so first obviously we will write the definition at a high level. Like, it's all about checking the performance of the application, okay, by applying some load or expected load. Okay, so when you are testing an application with one user, it's not called as performance testing. Basically you should apply some load. Okay, so who will give that load and all, we'll discuss later. But we should get some number, like we have to test the application with 100 users, 200 users, 300 users, something like that. Okay, so then only we call it as a performance testing. So checking the performance of an application by applying the expected load or some load is called performance testing. Generally, performance testing is measured on three terms. Okay, generally performance testing is measured on three terms. So what are those? So first one is speed, second one is stability, third one is scalability. See, earlier, few years ago, the performance testing was measured only with respect to speed. Speed refers to how fast the application is responding to your request with the expected or current load. Okay, in other words, the response time should be less than the service level agreement, SLA. SLA means service level agreement. What does that mean? See, generally the client who is asking us to do the performance testing, right, he will let us know the SLA, what they have agreed with the application team. Like they might have agreed that, like clicking of a button or a link, or navigating between different screens should not exceed 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 5 seconds. So that is SLA, service level agreement. So here, speed refers to how fast your application is loading, okay, while applying some load. Okay, how fast your pages are loading, how fast how fast it is we are getting the response. Okay, how fast we are getting the response. Okay, that is related to speed. And nowadays, along with speed, performance testing is also measured in terms of stability and scalability. What do you mean by stability? Stability means performance should not degrade even after using the application for a long time. For example, let's say you have been using the application for 4 to 5 hours. Okay, when you are using the application for 4 to 5 hours, okay, the performance should not degrade. The performance should not degrade. That means, let's say in the first 1 hour, okay, let's say in the first 1 hour, you are getting response times as 2 seconds. You have been executing or running the application. In the first 1 hour, you are getting response times as 2 seconds. That means the pages are loading within 2 seconds. Now let's say after executing or after running the application for 3-4 hours, the performance should not degrade. Like the response time should not be like 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds. No, the performance should be stable. The response time should be stable. Like how the application responded in the first 1 hour, the application should respond in the same way throughout the test, or in the last 1 hour also. That is referred, in terms of stability. Then it is also measured in terms of scalability. What do you mean by scalability here? The application's ability to handle increasing user without performance degradation. That means when you increase the number of users, the performance should not degrade. Especially, let's say you are running with 500 users, generally a load test. Then the performance should not degrade if you are running your test with 600 users or 800 users or something like that. Okay, so performance testing is measured based on these three terms: speed, stability, and scalability. Now we will see how these terms are related to different types of testing. Okay, now we will be discussing about different types of testing, performance testing. Okay, I will share you the different types of performance testing slide later, but I would like to use the notepad for now. Okay, I do have the slides for those, but I just want to continue with notepad here so that it will be more easy for you to understand for time being. Okay, so what are the different types of performance testing? Okay, different types of performance testing. So the first type of performance testing is load test. Okay, so this is okay. First, let me do one thing. Let me write down all the types of performance testing, the important ones. Okay, load test, stress testing. Okay, then you have endurance test. Then you have scalability testing. Then you have scalability testing. Then you have volume testing. Okay, then you have the most frequently, not frequently, recently popular testing, failover testing. Not frequently executed, but still it is popular in recent days. Failover testing. Okay, now we will discuss each one of them. Failover testing, we will discuss maybe day after tomorrow or something, because we have to cover some important concepts like what is a server, what is an application server, what is a web server, because performance testing is all about looking after the response times of the servers, right? So if you don't know what is a server, we might not be able to understand the failover testing completely. So that's the reason this particular concept we will discuss maybe day after tomorrow. But today we will discuss about these 5 types of performance testing. So the first one, the very basic one, or the first type of performance test we do is a load test. Without this load test, we will not perform remaining tests. Okay, it is that important. Okay, so what do you mean by load test? Checking the speed of the application under expected load. Okay, checking the speed of the application under some load, under expected load. So the term speed will relate to this type of test, load test. Okay, so load test means checking the speed of the application, okay, under expected load. What do you mean by load? What do you mean by the term load? Load means number of users. Number of users. So this is the first test that we do in every performance testing project, irrespective of the client you work with, irrespective of the project, irrespective of the company that you are working with. Anything, the load test is the first type of test that we perform. Okay, any performance tester would go with the load test first. Okay, here the term load indicates the number of users. Okay, then who will provide you the expected load? Like I said, number of users. Now who is going to provide us the number of users? Can anyone tell who will give us the number of users? Of course we have to test with like 500 users or 1000 users, but who is going to provide it?
User.
Any idea? Now who is going to provide the input to us? Okay, see, load generator is a component, Sindhu. Load generator is a component which is responsible for simulating the users. That's fine. That will take care of generating the users. But who will tell us with how many users you have to test? Okay, who will tell us? Like, let's say, hey, can you test my application with 500 users? Now, who is going to give that information to us? Obviously,
Client.
it will be client or the product owner, or you can say a business analyst also, because sometimes we might not be able to reach out to client directly, right? So in that case, we have business analyst who acts as a bridge between the client and the performance team, okay, or in fact all the stakeholders. Now the business analyst might provide us that data as well. Okay, so here the client or the business analyst, okay, will be providing the input to us, or will provide input. Okay, that is load volumes. When I say input, that is load volumes, with how many users we have to test, what is the target we have to achieve. For example, 500 users. Okay, for example, 500 users. Now this load test, one more important point with respect to load test is the load test will be executed for 1 hour. Okay, load test will be executed for 1 hour. Okay, that means you can start at 9:15 a.m. to 10:15 a.m., 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. It's up to you, but generally it should be executed for 1 hour. Okay, and in that 1 hour you should analyze how the application is responding with the expected load, or with the expected load. Yes. Okay, so always remember, load test will be executed for 1 hour only. You cannot execute a basic load test for 10 hours or 20 hours. That's a different kind of test. Okay, but the load test will always be executed for 1 hour. Now generally 2 seconds, generally 2 seconds is the SLA. Okay, that is the industry standard. Okay, it can be 3 to 5 seconds. It can be 3 to 5 seconds depending on the project. For example, the project architecture is too complex that it has to interact with various components, other components, maybe database, maybe some third-party web services, and whatever it is. So when the project architecture is very complex, they might accept it for 3 to 5 seconds. But at the end of the day, it is the project architect, okay, who will tell us how much time it should take to get the response. Should it take 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 5 seconds, like that? Okay, so we have to take that into count, especially when you are testing the performance of an application. You should always ensure that the response times, whatever you are getting, should be less than the SLA defined. Okay, then what is the expected output from the load test? Okay, when you run a load test, what is the expected task, or what is that expected? The expected is, first thing, what we have to verify is the response times. Verify response times. Response times means, for example, how much time the launch transaction is taking, how much time the login transaction is taking, how much time, let's say you are navigating to some screen, so how much time the navigation is taking, how much time log off is taking. So when you launch, how much time launch is taking. So launch is one transaction, login is one transaction, navigation to different screen is one transaction, log off is one transaction. That means each step is one transaction. Okay, now if any of these transactions are getting high response times, then that is one of the performance issue. That is one of the performance issue. Okay, so here the performance issue, we can call it as bottleneck. We will call it as a bottleneck. So in the performance testing terminology, the performance issue is called bottleneck. Okay, now, okay, so this is the first test that we execute as part of our performance testing project. Okay, now when can you say whether a load test is successful or not? Okay, you executed a load test, okay, with 500 users or whatever the expected load. Now how can you determine whether the load test is successful or not? So you can determine by considering various parameters, like for example, check for the number of errors. If the errors are more than 2 or 3%, obviously the test is considered as invalid. So that means whenever you are running a load test, the number of errors you get should be less than 2 or 3%. That is the standard. Okay, some projects might accept up to 5% also, but I'm just telling you at a generic level. So the number of errors what you get should be less than 2 to 3%. For example, after running a 1 hour of load test, if the overall number of transactions what you have achieved is, let's say, 10,000, the number of errors should be less than 2 to 3%. Okay, that is one criteria. The other criteria is based on the response times. So if you say your test is failed when you get very high response times as well. Okay, first point is when there are more number of errors, like more than 2 or 3%. Second point is when there are high response times. Then the third point is when you find any other application issues, like the application not responding, application crashing. Okay, when you see other kind of issues, then also the test remains failed. Okay, so these are the points that you need to consider whenever you are running a load test. Okay, so what are the 3 points, guys? I repeat again. When there are errors more than 2 or 3%, your test will be invalid. Okay, when there are high response times, when there are any other issues like application freezed or application not responding completely and so on. Okay, that's it. Now this is about load test. Do you have any questions with respect to load test? Did you guys understand what we are exactly doing as part of load test? So we will have some scenarios. So let's say some scenarios let's consider as a bank application. So for bank application, what are the most critical scenarios? Like what we discussed yesterday, transfer money from one account to another account is one of the critical scenario. Like download bank statement is one of the critical scenario. Like these scenarios we will be testing as part of the load test. Okay, I'm just taking an example of a bank application. So for bank application, these could be possible critical scenarios. There might be some other scenarios which are not that critical, like changing password, changing account password. Okay, applying a loan or something like that. So those are very rare. Not every day, every hour we see those users. We see those users doing the same things. Okay, so generally as part of performance testing, we go and test only the critical business scenarios. Okay, and we run the load test for these critical scenarios only, and we analyze how the application is responding. Okay, when more or multiple number of users are performing these actions like transfer money, download statement, and so on. Okay, so hope you understood what is load test all about, and what exactly we are verifying here. What is a bottleneck? What is a SLA? Okay, who will provide you the input, and so on. Always remember, load test will be executed for 1 hour only. Now the next type of test, okay, if all of you are okay with load test, okay, so we will move on to the next type of test, that is stress testing. What is stress testing? See, basically testing the application with more number of users than the load test. Okay, testing the application with more number of users than the load test. So let's say we have performed the load test with 500 users. So stress testing is something beyond the 500 users. Okay, beyond the 500 users, like 600 users, 700 users, 800 users. That means you are applying stress. Actual expected load is 500, but you are applying more stress, okay, than the expected load. That which we are calling it as a stress testing, right? So stress testing is all about testing the application with more number of users than the load test. And what are we verifying here? We are verifying how the application is responding with more number of users than the load test. Okay, verifying the behavior of the application, okay, when more number of users, okay, access the application than the load test. Okay, so I just took an example, right? If you are running a load test with 500 users, then you need to test you need to go for stress testing with more than 500 users. Okay, obviously the stress test is also run for 1 hour only. Stress test 1 hour execution only. Okay, 1 hour execution only. SLA is also 2 seconds only. That is as per the standard only. Okay, that means when you are applying more load than the expected one, the performance should not degrade. The SLA should remain same. Okay, they might be okay if the performance are slightly degraded, like 3 seconds or 4 seconds or 5 seconds, but the performance should not be degraded, okay, like up to 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, like that. Okay, first thing what we verify here is response times only. Okay, The other thing is whether the application is able to handle more number of users. Okay, whether the application is able to handle more number of users. That means the application should not crash. Okay, the application should not crash, isn't it? The application should not crash. Even though if you are testing with more number of users, the application should not crash. The only difference between the load test and stress test is we will test with more number of users. The other things are same, like 1 hour execution, SLA, and so on. Okay, so hope you guys understood what is stress testing. Okay, so any questions so far? Did you guys understand the difference between load test and stress test?
I have a question.
Yeah, tell me, Sindhu. I just looked at your ping. 2 seconds is the SLA, and load test will be executed for 1 hour. See, when okay, so that means you will be testing these two scenarios. Okay, like transfer money and download statement. So when I say testing these two scenarios, what are the different steps that we test? So first, the application we have to launch. I mean, for transfer money, I'm just writing down the steps. So let's say what is the next step? You need to log in, right? The next step would be something like navigate to your account. Navigate to your account. Obviously, the next step might be select a beneficiary to whom you want to send an amount. Okay, then enter the amount you wish to. Okay, and then click transfer, isn't it? Then you log out. So these are the steps that we test as part of transfer money. Similarly, for download statement also, you might have some steps like this: launching the application, then login, right? Then select account or navigate to your account. Okay, then select date range from when to when you want to download the bank statement. See, I'm just giving the possible steps. Okay, then click download statement. Okay, and then log off. So these are possible steps for download statement. So we are testing these steps, guys. So when I say we are doing a load test for these scenarios, indirectly we will be performing these steps. Okay, so the client will be giving us these scenario names. Along with that, they will be giving us the steps also. Like what are the steps that you need to follow? What are the steps that you need to record? When you have these steps, then only we will record the script. When you record the script, you enhance the script and you run it through controller, right, with multiple users, and then you analyze the performance, right? So for each of these transactions, like launch should not take 2 seconds, login should not take 2 seconds, navigate to your account should not take 2 seconds. If you click on transfer, it should not take 2 seconds. So that is the SLA. Okay, each of these transactions should not exceed 2 seconds. Okay, and then this transfer money, let's say you are running with 200 users. So these 200 users will run for 1 hour. The same scenario, they will run for 1 hour with 200 users. That means 200 users execute the same transfer money script for 1 hour. Okay, hope you understood now. So 200 users will run the same transfer money script for 1 hour. After 1 hour, they stop executing the scenario, and then we'll go ahead and analyze the results. So hope you understood. Hope I answered your question, Sindhu. Whatever you pinged.
Oh, it's an
Okay.
execution is recurring, right? Like multiple times for the 200 users.
Yes. These 200 users, they keep on executing for 1 hour. Okay. I mean, how many times they will execute the same scenario? It depends on the requirement again. It depends on the requirement. For example, the requirement will be 200 users. Let's say 600 iterations. 600 iterations. The requirement will be something like this. Okay, I'm just giving an example. So what do you mean by iteration? When a user executes all these steps once, that becomes one iteration. Okay, so when a user execute all these steps once, that will become one iteration. So the requirement will be something like 200 users should complete 600 iterations overall. Okay, or you can say 6,000 iterations overall, whatever it is, depending on the requirement. So 200 users together should complete 6,000 iterations in 1 hour. That will be actual requirement. Okay, how they will achieve exact 6,000 iterations and all we will discuss later. That's a different concept. That is called workload modeling. Okay, exactly 200 users should achieve 6,000 iterations. Okay, so we have to work something. We have to discuss something about workload modeling. Then you will understand how they exactly achieve the target. But for today, this is the target. I mean, this is what we can discuss. Like 200 users will run for 1 hour, and in that 1 hour, they should achieve something like this. The target will be something like this. I hope you understood what is iteration. Also, iteration means when one user execute all these steps once, that will become one iteration. Like that, 200 users should complete, let's say 6,000 iterations in 1 hour. That should be our target. That should be like, I'm just giving an example. Okay, so hope you understood so far, like whatever we have discussed, right? Any questions? Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Now, coming to stress testing, same thing. The same number of users will run for 1 hour. I mean, more number of users will run for 1 hour. Generally, whatever the number of users we tested as part of load test, more than that number. Okay, more than that number of users, we will go ahead and test it. That means at the end of the day, we will achieve more target than the load test. As part of our stress testing, we will achieve more target than the expected than the load test. Okay, so this is all about stress testing. So it's all about whether the application is able to handle more number of users or not. When we are applying some stress beyond the expected load, how the application is responding. That's all about load stress testing. Now the third type of test is endurance test. Okay, we call it as a soak test also. We call it as a duration test also. So in some of the projects they call it as endurance test. In some of the projects they call it as soak test. In some of the projects they call it as duration test. But all of them refer to the same thing. Okay, all of them, the meaning is same. Even though they call it with different names, the actual meaning is same. Now, what is this endurance test all about? Okay, it is about checking the stability of the application. Okay, just few minutes ago we have discussed about the term stability, right? So that stability is referring to the endurance test. It is about stability. It is about checking the stability of the application. Okay, what does that mean? So here the endurance test will not run for 1 hour. Okay, the endurance test will be run for, okay, runs for minimum of 3 hours. Okay, it can go for 5 hours, it can go for 8 hours, it can go for 1 day, it can go for 3 days, it can go for 5 days also. That means the test will run for minimum of 3 hours. It can go to 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, depending on the requirement of the project. Okay, why we are running for so long duration? Because to check the stability of an application, how the application is responding, okay, in the long run. So what it means, let's say I'm running the test for 5 hours. So my target is to verify how the application responded in the first 1 hour, how the application responded in the second 1 hour, in fact, how the application responded in the last 1 hour. So the expected thing is the application performance should remain same during the endurance test. That is, during the complete 5 hours of load test, the application performance should remain same. That means that if the response times are, let's say, less than 2 seconds in the first 1 hour, okay, it should remain same or maybe near to that in the last 1 hour also. The performance should not degrade. That means in the first 1 hour, if you are getting response times of 1.5 or 2 seconds, in the last 1 hour of load test, it should not be like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. That's what it means. Okay. So the application should behave similarly throughout the test. That means response time should not degrade during the test. You got my point? That is the important thing. Okay, if you want, I can make a note of it also. The application, okay, should behave or should respond similarly throughout the test. Okay, so the performance should not degrade. That's what it means. The performance should not degrade. You understood, right? So why are we testing this? To ensure that there is some stability. Okay, so endurance test will be executed for minimum of 3 hours. It can go up till 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, 3 days, 5 days. So, okay, first thing what we verify is the performance should not degrade. The second thing is one more important point here. There is a chance of memory leak. There is a chance of something called as memory leak. What do you mean by memory leak? When it happens, how it happens, what are the reasons, we will discuss later. But there is one more parameter why we go for a endurance test is to find out if there is a memory leak or not. So when there is a memory leak, we will get to see some errors like out of memory exceptions. When you are running an endurance test for 3 hours or 5 hours or something like that, you might get to see out of memory exceptions due to memory leak. What is memory leak and all, we will discuss later. Okay, and one more important point is the load for this particular endurance test. Okay, in some projects the load will be same as load test. For example, if the load in the load test, if we are testing with 500 users, endurance test also should be executed with 500 users. Okay, in some other projects users will be, or the load will be 75% of the load test. In some other projects, okay, users load will be 75% of the load test. For example, okay, for example, if load test is executed with 500 users, okay, then soak test or endurance test will be, okay, will be executed with 75% load. What is 75% of 500? I assume it is 375. So endurance test or soak test will be executed with 375 users. Okay, so hope you understood. So there's a difference in terms of load also. In some projects we go with 100% load, like what is the load that we tested, same thing we do it here. In some projects they will go with 75% of the load only. That means if load test is executed with 500 users, the endurance test or soak test will be executed with 375 users. So this is all about endurance test. Any doubts so far? Very important. Okay, from a performance testing point of view, very important type of test. After the load test, this is very important, and frequently we will execute this test. So load test and endurance test are frequently executed. Any questions so far? Guys, I have slide with respect to these. I will share later on, but I just want to go ahead with notepad so that I clearly make a note of all the points. Okay, so that if I share this notepad also, you will clearly understand, like, or you can refer it in future as well. I'll share this notepad file as well with you guys. Okay, so please don't think that I'm not sharing any slide, or I'm not explaining any, through any slides. I do have slides. Once we complete this, if you refer to those slides, it will be more easy for you to understand. Okay, because I'm just targeting the concept. I just want you to understand the main or core differences of these tests. Okay, so hope you guys understood what is endurance test. Okay, any questions so far? I would like to wait for 10 seconds here to take some questions from you guys. Okay, so the next type of test is scalability testing. Okay, the next type of test is scalability testing. What do you mean by this scalability testing? Obviously, a few minutes ago when we have referred to some of the terms like speed, stability, and scalability, obviously the term scalability refers to the scalability test here. Okay, direct mapping. Now, what is this scalability? It's all about checking the scalability of the application. Okay, so what do you mean by scalability? That means the application should be able to handle more number of users. But on what basis? Obviously, we are checking the scalability of application, but on what basis? For example, you can test the application for future growth. Okay, you can test the application for future growth. For example, if the client says, hey, today the number of users what we have in production, or what what we have in production is, let's say 500. But additionally, the client might add some point like, in future, the number of users might increase from 500 to 750, or the other way, like the client might say the number of users might increase from, or the number of users might increase to, or let's discuss in this way. The client might say the number of users might increase by 50%, or the number of users might increase by 75%, or number of users might increase by 100%. The client might say, uh, so it says, currently we are testing with we have 500 users in production. Considering future growth in next 6 months to 1 year, the number of users might increase by 50%. Okay, number of users might increase by 50%. So here, the point is, you can test the application considering, ignore the spelling mistakes, guys, considering future growth. Okay, the client will tell you what might be the growth in future, maybe maybe in next 6 months or 1 year, maybe next 6 months or 1 year. Okay, if client is saying, okay, if client is saying, okay, in next 6 months, okay, users might increase by 50%. Okay, users might increase by 50%. So if current number of users, what we are testing, if current number of users, okay, what we are testing for as part of load test, okay, as part of load test is 500, then scalability test can be performed with how many? 50% means 250, right? So total 750 users. So total 750 users. Okay. Okay. If current number of users what we are testing as part of load test is 500, then scalability testing can be performed with 750 users. Okay, that's how it goes. But the information with how many users we have to test, the client will give. Generally, in the recent projects or in the past few projects what we have been working, generally what we do is we go for a 200% load test. As part of scalability test, we go for a 200% load test. Okay, client might tell you or might not tell you, but generally we go with 200% by default. So let's say if load test is done with 500 users, then 200% load is 1000 users. 200% is 1000 users. So when I say load test is done with 500 users, this will be you can say it as a 100% load. You can say it as a 100% load. This is 100% load. When you say 200% load, obviously double of that is 1000 users. Okay, you got to know one more important point apart from this is, sometimes we have to test the max number of users it can support. The max number of users it can support. Okay, before that I would like to add one more point, especially with respect to scalability test. Recently what happened, maybe in last I think 1.5 years ago, we all know that we faced the pandemic, right? During pandemic, what happened, in one of the projects that I was working with, the number of users accessing the application increased by 4 times. We all know the users, the users or we directly not going to the stores, or let's take an example of a bank application. The bank users, we are not directly going to banks for performing some transactions or whatever the work we have. During pandemic, what happened? Most of the users, they prefer to use online applications. So what happened during the pandemic? The number of users accessing the online application increased, okay, to some extent. What client updated us is, hey, we have observed some increase in terms of online users. We are assuming that the number of users might increase to 400% in next 3-4 months during this pandemic. So immediately what client updated us is, can you test the application and tell us if it is supporting 400% of users or not? So immediately what did we do? We ran a 100% load test, that is a normal load test. Then if it is successful, we ran a 200% load test. If it is successful, we ran a 300% load test. If it is successful, then we ran a 400% load test. Okay, for some of the applications, all 4 tests went well. For some of the applications, the application was not responding after 300% load. The application was too slow after 300% load. Sometimes for some of the applications, they crashed after 300% load. So as a performance tester, we were able to let them know that which application was supporting 400% load, which application was supporting 300% of the load, which application was supporting 200% of the load. Okay, so this was a pretty much a real-time example what happened in the recent past during the pandemic. Okay, one good example. Sometimes what will happen, the client will even tell you, can you go to an extent and tell where exactly it is failing? Go to an extent and tell where exactly it is failing. Now let's take an example of a restaurant, nearby restaurant, or a hotel, or whatever it is, whatever you call. Let's say there is a restaurant, and there are 5 tables, and there is one helper, okay, who will look after those tables. When I say look after, the helper will take orders from the customers, and he will take care of delivering the food. Now, due to high demand, the owner of the restaurant decided to increase the number of tables from 5 to 7. Okay, this helper who was managing those 5 tables, now he has to manage 7 tables. Now he is able to manage, he is able to take the order from the customers, and he is able to deliver the food. That's fine. Now again there is a demand. Now the owner of the restaurant again decided to increase the number of tables from 9 to 11. No, sorry, from 7 to 9. Let's say from 7 to 9. Now the helper who was managing 7 tables easily, now he couldn't manage 9 tables. Of course he could manage, but there was a delay in terms of delivering the food. Earlier he used to deliver the food in 10 minutes for all the 7 tables. Now he is taking some 30 minutes because the number of orders increased, the number of tables increased, the number of orders increased, and is taking more time to deliver the food. Now again there is a demand in terms of there is a demand. Now the owner has decided to increase the number of tables from 9 to 11. The helper who was struggling to deliver the food on time, and in fact he was the helper was taking more time, the order was getting delayed in terms of delivery. Now because the owner increased the tables from 9 to 11, now the helper said, no, I cannot deliver the food, nor I can take the order. That's done. The max I could do is for 9 tables. I cannot do it, or I cannot work, or I cannot manage 11 tables. Now what exactly we are understanding from this example is, the helper could manage only 9 tables, but again there is a performance, there is an impact on the performance there also. That means earlier he could manage to deliver the food in 10 minutes, but now with increase in number of tables, he is taking 30 minutes. That means there is a performance degradation there. And again at some point of time, there is a complete no. There is a complete no. That means the application or the helper is not responding at all. The application said no, it's done. We cannot respond. I cannot respond. That means the max the helper could do is 9 tables. So here also in performance testing, sometimes the client will ask you to test how many users max the application can support. Okay, so slowly we have to increase the load. So let's say we will begin with 500 users, that is the expected load test. From 500 we will go to 700, from 700 to 900, 900 to 1200, 1200 to 1500, and we will see at what point of time the performance is degrading completely, and at what point of time the application is crashing, or the application is not loading, or application is freezing, or application is not responding at all. So that information we have to provide. So that information also you can provide here as part of this. Okay, so I'll tell you, I'll add just one point, that what is the max number of users, okay, the application can support. So we can derive this also by simply increasing the number of users, and at some point of time we will come to know where the performance is getting degraded. When I say the performance degradation, what does that mean? It means the response times are increasing. Earlier it used to be 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Now it is 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Okay, so that is all about the scalability test. So we have discussed about 4 important types of tests. Okay, now the last type of test what we will discuss for today is volume testing. Okay, one second. Yes. Okay, so volume testing is more or less similar to load test only. Okay, I'll make a note of it quickly here. Volume test is same as load test. Volume test is same as load test, except that there will be huge data populated in database. Except that there will be huge data populated or entered or inserted, populated in the database. So what does this mean? So volume test is exactly same as load test. There is no difference. We will run with the expected load. We will run for 1 hour. We will verify the same SLA, same thing. Okay, but the only thing is there will be change in terms of data that is present in the database. So let's assume currently uh, for 500 users, okay, let's assume there are 1 lakh records in database currently. There are 1 lakh records in database currently. 1 lakh records in database currently. Now the client assumes that after 1 year or 2 years, the number of records, okay, they keep on updating in database, they might reach to up to 3 to 4 lakhs. After 1 or 2 years, the number of records in database might increase from 1 lakh to 3 lakhs, or from 1 lakh to 4 lakhs. Okay, client says in future the number of records in database might increase. Okay, then what will happen in that case? The same number of users will be there, but number of records in database will be more. So what we have to test as part of this is, we have to intentionally, now itself, not after 2 years, now itself, we have to intentionally insert 3 to 4 lakh records of data into database with the help of database administrator or the application team, and do a round of load test. When the number of records are more or increased to 3 to 4 lakhs, how the application is responding, especially how the SQL queries are responding, how much time the SQL queries are taking to respond, are there any long running queries? Okay, what are the response times, whether there are any long running queries? Okay, how do you know how much time the SQL queries are taking, or how do you know how much time what is the performance degradation and all? We can use some APM tools like the application monitoring tools like AppDynamics or Dynatrace and so on. Okay, so I will write here currently. Okay, so considering, or let's write like this. So client says in future the number of records in database might increase to 4 lakhs, let's say, might increase to 4 lakhs. So now what we have to do? Now itself, okay, now itself, we have to insert, now itself, okay, we have to insert those 4 lakh records to database with help of DBA, database administrator, or any database techie guy. Okay, obviously every project will have database team and we will have support from there. So we can discuss with the application team or the development team and the database team and get it done. Now, when there are 4 lakh records, now we will run a load test. Okay, that means we will run a load test, which means we are calling it as a volume test only. In fact, because everything is same, only thing is the number of records will be more. Or you can say directly, instead of confusion, I will say we'll run a volume test, which is exactly same as load test. Nothing difference. Only difference is we will insert more number of records in database. Then what are we verifying? We are verifying response times, especially SQL queries response time. Okay, whether there are any long running queries. Whether there are any long running queries. Okay, how do you know whether there are any long running queries? We use APM tools. We use APM tools like AppDynamics, Dynatrace, etc. So every project will is having APM tool now, application monitoring tool, where we analyze the performance of the application, like which are the long running queries, how much time it is taking, okay, and so on. Anyhow, we have a session on AppDynamics later on, right? So I will explain you there. Okay, I'll show them practically. So this is about volume test case. So we have discussed 5 types of tests today. Any questions so far? Whatever the remaining one we have, the failover test, we will discuss day after tomorrow, because I have to explain what is a server, what is a server architecture, what is a database server, what is an application server. All these terms we have to discuss in order to understand how a failover test will be executed and what is exactly a failover test. Okay, so for today, these are the 5 different types of tests we'll be discussing. See, stress testing is just testing with more number of users. That's it. But when it comes to scalability test, client will tell us exactly where to stop, or client will tell us what is the expected growth. Okay, so should we run a 100% load test, a 200% load test, a 300% load test? Okay, how much amount of load we should apply? The client will tell us. The client will tell us. Okay, but when it comes to stress testing, we will just test with more number of users. It could be anything. Like we will just test the system. Like like we'll just test with we'll just test the application with more number of users. Like we can go up to 600, 700, 800 like that and see how the application is responding. If client explicitly says go and test until some number, you can go ahead and test until some number. Both it will run for 1 hour only. Okay, scalability test will run for 1 hour only. Only test that will run for more number of time or longer duration is endurance test only. Endurance test or soak test or duration is the only test which will run for more number of hours. All the other tests will run for 1 hour. Suresh, we can increase the performance of an application from our end only if you have access to do that, and only if you have the skills to do that. How can you increase the performance from our end? That means you should be able to write good SQL queries, or you should be able to write a good Java code. Okay, or you should be able to know how the Java application is configured and its project architecture and so on. If you are well versed with all these things, you will be able to do it from your end, provided you have the permission to do it. Generally, as a performance tester, we do not have the permission to change the code, or access the code or do some changes. Okay, unless and
Yes,
until you are qualified to do that.
yes, it is not our responsibility, right?
No, it is not our responsibility. As a performance tester, we will just provide our observations to client that these are the areas where the performance degradation is observed. That is the role of performance tester. But
Okay.
there is one more role called performance engineer. So how a performance tester and a performance engineer is differentiated is, performance tester will tell you where exactly there is a performance degradation, what exactly is happening. But a performance engineer will tell you what can be done to fix the issue. But performance engineer might not have access to fix it. But performance engineer can tell you what can be done in a better way to fix the issue, to fix the performance degradation issue. You got my point? So that's that there's a thin line between performance tester and performance engineer. So
Yes.
everyone will become a performance tester initially and upskill themselves to become a performance engineer later on. Okay, so for
Oh,
to become a performance engineer, you need to learn beyond LoadRunner. Okay, so we will discuss later on, like what are the additional things to that we have to learn to become a performance engineer. But as I said, performance tester will identify the problems. Performance engineer will try to provide the solutions to those problems. He might not implement the solution directly, but he can provide the solutions.
okay.
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 Sindhu, okay, you missed the yesterday's demo session. Yes, I mean, when you say coding skills, do we need to have coding skills for LoadRunner? If it is most of the applications are Java based, right? So what is a Java? A little bit of core Java, JVM architecture. There is something called garbage collection mechanism. Okay, heap dumps, thread dumps. These are the additional concepts which you need to learn to become a performance engineer, so that you will have some idea about what can be the solution for the issue, so that you can provide the same solution to them. Okay, if you have access, if you're further interested, learn the complete development and you can implement the same if you have access. So begin with a performance tester, become a performance engineer. You can become a developer also later on if you have further interest. Okay, it's up to us. Okay, every day it's a new learning and there is no end for that, right? We all know that. Okay, so that's it for today. So if you have any further questions, you can reach out to me on WhatsApp directly or in the group. I'm always available. And one more thing, those who didn't attend yesterday's session, please please go through the demo session once. If you have any questions related to the course content, course duration, course timings, course fee and all, please reach out to me. Okay, or you can reach out to Kumar sir as well. Okay, any other questions from your end? So before I
Sorry, in between we lost your voice. Could you please repeat like coding skills regarding coding skills?
No, you need not require coding skills as of now. I mean, because as a performance tester, you need to know basics of C language. That anyhow we are covering as part of our course. Okay, so as a performance tester, we need not learn core Java and all. So if you want to become a performance engineer, that which is the next level of performance tester, right? So it's always better to learn a bit of core Java, okay, a bit of SQL, so that you will be in a position to identify what could be the exact issue for the performance degradation. Like exactly what can be done to improve. Like if you know a little bit of core Java, then you know what is a method and all, like how better you can write this code. Okay, you can, if you have access to the code, you go through the code and identify, okay, this code could have been written like this to improve the performance. So you can go up to that level if you are interested. But as of now, performance engineers are also just learning a bit of core Java and SQL. They are trying to provide their inputs to development team, like what can be done better. Okay, but as of now, I don't see performance engineer changing the code or having access to the code directly to change. Okay, so he can just provide the observations like what could have been done better. So to that level you can go, and if you are able to change the code, obviously you will become a developer, right? Why do you become a performance engineer when you have the ability to change the code, that when you have the ability to write the complete code, obviously you can become a developer, obviously, right? So that's how it looks. Anjali, stress testing is testing with more number of users. So load testing, let's say we are testing with 500 users. Stress testing is testing with more number of users, like beyond the load test, like 600 users or 700 users, depending on the client requirement. Okay, so when we discuss in our further sessions, I'll tell you how the client requirement will be for each of these type of tests. Okay, so that you'll clearly understand practically as well. So for as of now, just understand that stress testing is testing with more number of users beyond the load test. Okay, with your permission, I'm going to stop recording for today. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to me on WhatsApp. Okay, so